So tonight I want to tell you how to create a compelling product vision and a little bit about myself. I'm a senior product manager at Amazon. I am the technical variant. That just means I don't code every day. I like coding sometimes, but I typically work on a more technical product. So for me, that includes a lot of real-time systems, that includes machine learning, that includes a lot of algorithms and data science, and also thinking about technology patterns that would scale across the world, across a variety of features. So that's me. I also worked at Microsoft before this. I worked on a thing called HoloLens. It's like an augmented reality helmet that you put on your head. Kind of cool, but I was ready for something different, and customer reviews is all me now. All right, let's get right into it. Can anyone guess actually which product is reviewed right here that has 42,000 reviews?
You.
Any guesses? No, not me. I hope my rating is that good, but any ideas on what this is? Say it again? It's the Echo Dot, actually. And it is one of the most reviewed, but not the most reviewed product on Amazon. So yeah, and a pretty good star rating. All right, so this is what I'm going to talk about today. I broke it down into 5 topics. So here's what we're going to do. Why I chose this topic. This one's a little bit near and dear to me as well, among the many other topics I could have chose. I want to talk about what it means to be a visionary. There's just this meme about what it means to be a visionary that I want to die. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk more specifically about how you create a compelling product vision and what that looks like in a very step-by-step process. I'm going to talk about how to communicate your product vision, which a lot of people forget about, but is actually really important. That product vision is worth nothing if it's only in your head. So I'm going to talk about communication, and then I'm also going to talk about how to make it a reality. I'm going to spend a little bit less time on that because today is all about the vision, but if you can't execute your product vision, you're not going to go anywhere. Alrighty, let's do it. Why I chose this topic. So last winter, I met with one of my peers at work, and I'm going to keep them anonymous. They're having a really tough day, and they said, "Hey, Will, can we go get a coffee? I need to talk about something." And I could tell something was wrong because this person didn't look very happy. And maybe their dog died. Maybe they had a tough conversation with their manager. I really don't know, but this person needed to talk. And we went to Starbucks below my building. And this is what she said to me. Not the exact words, but basically this. She said, "I can't come up with any good ideas for my product. I'm not a visionary and I'm not creative." How do you come up with your product vision? I feel like giving up as a product manager every day because of this. And I didn't really know what to say to that, actually. It took me a while to think of how do I actually do that? I knew in my head how I did it, but I had a tough time really describing it to her in that moment. So I decided to give this talk today because of that conversation that I had. And I realized in my own career, I wish someone had given this talk to me before I started, because I made a lot of the mistakes that many people make when creating a product vision. And this is a struggle I think many product managers go through in their career. And I want to help everyone here, or everyone who watches online, or anyone who gets exposure to this in some way, not have to feel like this, be in tears, feel like they can't be a product manager. So here's why I'm here. When I worked at Microsoft, this was a new hot thing. And just to put it really simply, here's how you might think about a growth mindset with respect to a product vision. The fixed mindset, on the other hand, is I'm born with this ability or I don't have it. I can't learn. I'm stuck. I'm not creative. I'm not a visionary. I'm not going to be able to come up with the right ideas. I need to leave that to someone else. That is the mindset that my friend had when she came to me at Starbucks and told me that she couldn't be a product manager. And I think a lot of people in here would like to say that they don't have that mindset. And you may have a growth mindset in other areas of your career, but when it comes to being a visionary, I find that many people actually have this mindset and they may not realize it. I say, you know what, I'm not a visionary. I'm not going to be Steve Jobs. I'm not going to be Elon. And it's good to check yourself and say, do I think that way? Or do I think I have the potential to be a visionary? And on the other hand, we have the growth mindset. And you can guess it's the opposite of the fixed mindset. Basically, you believe that you can overcome any challenge by working at it. The potential to do something is not something you're born with. You have to stick with it, work at it, and then you can achieve whatever you want. So growth mindset is a great way to think about any problem in your career. But for being a visionary, I think this is a really important concept and you should check yourself and say, like, which viewpoint do I have? And I think if you are here at this talk today, I hope you have the second one, the growth mindset, because if you have the first one, I'm not going to be able to help you, honestly. So please think about what it means to have a growth mindset. Does anyone, put on their LinkedIn that they're a thought leader, or did anyone, give a huge talk about what their next big idea was? Anyone here who might be an aspiring visionary? Nobody? Okay, I expected 0 for that one too. Yeah, so not many people would describe themselves as a visionary, and I think there's some very good reasons for that. And part of that is because a lot of who we think is a visionary are people like this. Does anyone know all 6 people here? I'm going to guess 0 people know 6, but some people might know 5. These are some things that I hear a lot about what a visionary is. And I would say they're all wrong. So one of them is that, I can't say I'm a visionary because I just don't have those crazy ideas. I don't know the moonshot. I'm not making flying skateboards or self-driving cars. And there's this meme out there that in order to be a visionary, you have to have these wild, outlandish ideas. And you have to go on a long walk on the weekend by yourself and come home and have this magical idea that you've come up with. And we just keep perpetuating that meme over and over again. But in reality, coming up with a vision really doesn't work that way. Another one is that visionaries seem to know everything about the future. They know it'll happen in 100 years from now, 50 years from now, even 10 years from now. And the reality is that humans are really, really bad at making predictions about the future. So most successful visionaries aren't actually that good at predicting the future because nobody is. So if you thought that's what a visionary was, I would encourage you to chuck that one out and reconsider. The other one is about being a visionary as a personality attribute. When I talked about being a visionary, did anyone have a fictional person in their head about what a visionary looked like? Anybody? Yeah? What did you think this person looked like?
I mean, maybe not visual, but personality-wise.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. What did you think? What popped in, it doesn't have to be right, but what popped into your head? Those subconscious attributes that you thought about.
Yeah, it's probably not right, but just I pictured someone bouncing around the halls, bouncing around the rooms, commanding the space, always shooting wild ideas out there. It's just a totally exaggerated picture, right? That's just
I think that's very reasonable. And I'm going to go back one. But there's one thing that's in common with all these people. What do we know about this guy? He sends very strange tweets on Twitter all day. And he's a very eccentric man. And I would actually say he is a visionary. But he's also perpetuated this personality that people tend to attribute to visionary that might not have anything to do with whether he actually is one. This dude right here, he wears the same turtleneck sweater every day. He has some other weird things too, where he never put a license plate on his car. He really perpetuated the idea that you have to be outrageous or different or kind of weird to be a visionary. This dude right here, I don't know if you can see, but he's got this little ponytail haircut thing, and he brews this strange tea. He makes his intern brew this strange tea for him that gives him ideas and everything. He also wears somewhat strange clothes. His wife is very out there. Again, he is fictional, but we're perpetuating the idea that you have to be this crazy out there person in order to be a visionary. Madeline, I don't think she's really doing that. Renee is out in the woods finding rocks. Actually, Carly is very normal as well. But a lot of these people are perpetuating a meme or this idea that you have to be strange to be a visionary. And that is really not true. And I think it's very damaging because people who have visionary ideas think they can't be one because of stuff like this. So that is one of the memes about being a visionary that I really hope dies. And I understand why people do it. And I understand why it's in TV shows like Mozart in the Jungle. But it has nothing to do with being a visionary. And I hope you, as much as you can, get that out of your brain. So what really is a visionary? I'm going to propose that it's actually only 3 things. And it took a while to think about this, but the 3 things. One is you take time to deeply understand customer needs and wants, to deeply understand the problem space, and to deeply understand the product constraints. And notice this has nothing about crazy flying skateboard ideas. This is just Do you know what your customers want? Do you understand how the market functions? Do you understand what are the constraints? Like what is possible, what is not possible? This is not rocket science, but it does take a little bit of work. You have to like spend a lot of time listening to your customers. You got to look at data. You have to be really intimately involved in the problem you're trying to solve. So this is number one, and I'm going to spend more time on this. Number two, is there anyone here who does not like taking risks? It's okay if you don't like taking risks. Anybody? Okay, yeah, it's totally fun. I'm nervous about taking risks sometimes too. And another reason that people are really afraid of being a visionary is, you think you have to have that electric skateboard idea, that flying car idea. And that's scary because you can be wrong and you can be ridiculed because your idea didn't make any sense. And people are scared of being a visionary because, hey, it's risky. And I'm going to say that being a visionary has something to do with taking a risk, but you just have to take a little risk. And the more you know about your customers, the more you know the product space, the smaller the risk is. So if you're not a risk taker, I'd encourage you to think that you don't have to be a crazy risk taker, but just sign yourself up for a little bit. That's all you need to be comfortable with. The last one is the one I think most people forget, is that if you're a visionary, you're a highly effective and empathetic communicator. And like I was saying before, your vision is worth nothing if it's only in your head. There are very few product spaces where you can do it all on your own. And in order to be successful with your vision, you need to take it from your head into many other people's heads and have them help you get to where you need to be. So these are the three things. I took a long time to think about these, but that's really it. And I hope you realize you can be a visionary. Every single person in here. Like those three things that I gave you are not rocket science. And I think everyone here can achieve them. So if you came into this, if I asked you, are you a visionary? And you thought, no way, I'm never raising my hand. I want to encourage you to rethink that and say, hey, I can actually achieve this. Like really, I did not ask anything unreasonable of you. Like all those three things are very reasonable, and I would say are actually core responsibilities of a product manager. So visionary is within reach of everybody here. Has anyone seen the TV show Silicon Valley? Yeah? Good show, maybe? All right, so this dude is one of my favorite characters. I think he is a horrible role model, and many of you might agree with me on that, but there's this one scene where he needs a new name for the startup that he's working on called Pied Piper, and he goes out into the Mojave Desert. He does some strange drugs, and like this is the way we find our product vision. And I think the show's creators got it right a little bit, because when he wakes up from his vision, he's passed out in a public restroom and totally out of it. So it clearly didn't work. But there's this other meme out there that in order to develop your product vision, you need to go on this long walk and think magical thoughts or do some strange drugs or go on a vision quest, and then you'll find out what you need to do. And I think there's a reason this is in a TV show and this is not reality, because let me tell you, it is not reality. So product visions don't happen this way. It is very tempting to believe it works this way, because it almost might be easier. Like all you gotta do is go take that walk in the woods. Just find some peyote to spark ideas in your mind. Like that's honestly a little bit easier than it actually is. But if you thought that's how it worked, I'm gonna break the bad news. Like this is not how product visions are created. So there's some gift that I found on the internet, and you might think, what am I doing with this monkey? He's bashing the keyboard. This is actually very much related to the last slide. And if you think about what Erlich Bachman, that guy in the last slide, is doing, he's isolated. He's in a box and he's just trying to come up with something out of nothing. He's having a very hard time with that. And there's a theorem. Does anyone know the theorem that describes this? Can anyone guess it? Exactly, nailed it. Infinite monkey theorem. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah, speak up.
Infinite monkeys given an infinite amount of time can write a work of Shakespeare.
Exactly. So the theorem says, and this has been mathematically proven, it is true, that if you take a monkey and you get him to bang on the keyboard for an infinite amount of time, he will write all the works of Shakespeare. And you can write a mathematical proof of this. This is real. And you can think about, how does this apply to a product vision? if I sat here and I just banged on my MacBook for an infinite amount of time, I would eventually, theoretically, come up with an amazing product vision. But here's the thing, like the chance of me actually nailing that or the amount of time it would take is insane. So when you think about, Erlich Bachman in the desert doing his thing, he's actually practicing infinite monkey theorem. And I think a lot of people, when they're trying to come up with their product vision, do this. They go into a conference room and, just throw up an empty whiteboard and say, all right, let's think. And like as much as you might hate to realize it, this is infinite monkey theorem. And this is not how you come up with a product vision. You don't want to be isolated in a box trying to come up with stuff out of nowhere. So if you've been in one of those whiteboard meetings and just the ideas are not flowing, you have no idea, what's the first thing to focus on, recognize if you're practicing infinite monkey theorem and get out of there. Because this is not the most productive way to do it, but it's a way that a lot of people try first. So, if you're trying that, this is probably the question that you had. And really, this is a question that everyone has. And you're wondering, hey, I need to write this document to show to my leadership next week, or hey, I have to pitch to investors. Like, I don't have any good ideas to impress them with. And a lot of product management runs on great ideas. And if you're like my friend who I talked about in the beginning, like you come to this point and you spend weeks on this point, you spend months on this point, and you feel stuck. You feel like you can't get there. So if you have thought about this before, don't feel bad. We all started here, but I'm going to tell you how to get there. So there are only 3 answers to this question. And you might think, wow, that's very simple. But in every product problem I've ever gone through, like it really just is one of 3 answers. And here they are. Number 1, I think more than anything, it's usually this one. Like I would say maybe 80% of the cases, it's this. You don't deeply understand your customer needs and wants. And like that can be a tough pill to swallow because as a product manager, this is your job. You have to know what your customers really want. You really want to deeply understand what their motivations are, what they're looking for out of your product. But when you're grasping for straws, doing your infinite monkey theorem, trying to come up with ideas, what you're really admitting is that like you don't know where to start. And I would suggest you should always start with your customers. Your customers will give you ideas for free. There's a quote that I'm going to go through later from a very famous local guy that addresses this. And many companies do it this way. But if you don't have any good ideas, like really start with your customers. Number 2 is that you don't understand the dynamics of your problem space. And this one's a little bit more difficult to grasp, but I'll tell you what it means. Imagine, if you went into an interview room one day for Blue Origin. Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos' rocket company. And the interviewer said to you, all right, how are we going to increase thrust by 25% in our rocket? Like, you're not going to know the first thing about this, so you can't propose a great product vision because you have no idea how rockets work, unless anyone here really does know how rockets work. But most of us don't know that. So we really can't propose an educated product vision for that problem because we don't know the first thing about rockets. So most business problems and the people who come up with a vision for them really, really intimately know the dynamics of their problem space. The third one is that you don't understand your product constraints. Has anyone been in like a brainstorming meeting and someone proposed something and you just knew right away this is completely, out of left field and is not going to happen? Has anyone had that experience?
Of course.
Yeah. Do you remember what the crazy idea was?
No.
All right.
So many.
I'll give you one. Like, imagine if you all are my team and I come to you and say, by next week, we're going to have people living on the moon. Come join me right now. We're going to go do it. Like, what's your reaction going to be to me? Like, this guy is an idiot. And honestly, if I told you that, I would be an idiot because I really don't understand what are the constraints of that problem. How am I going to get humans, into space? How am I going to sustain them when they're there? Like, I have no idea the constraints of my product space, so I'm proposing things that really just don't make any sense. That was an extreme example, but you'll often find people who propose great ideas, but they don't understand what the pitfalls are and why that may or may not be a great vision. So these are the 3 things. The first one, I gave another talk on this last year about how to know what your customers want. But really, number one, if you could spend 80% of your time on one of these three things, I would do this one. Find out what your customers want. Like I said before, they will literally give you ideas for free. Customers will tell you what they want. They might not write it down in a PowerPoint document, but they will give you the information you need to come up with your next idea. And if you listen to lots of stories about entrepreneurship or how I came up with this great product idea, what you'll usually find is the inventor or the founder talks about like an aha moment they had when listening to a customer. So spend 80% of your time on this. Number two, let's take that rocket example again where I need to boost thrust by 25%. The only way I'm going to do that is to learn about rockets. So if you're finding this is your problem, you need to learn about rockets. In a lot of problem domains, you'll need to spend some time learning about the dynamics of the problem space. A very real example for me is when I joined HoloLens at Microsoft. I honestly didn't know the first thing about augmented reality. And a lot of my time I spent doing number two so I could understand how does augmented reality work. And now I know a lot about augmented reality, but before I couldn't really make any educated visions about HoloLens because I didn't know how it worked. And number three, I'll suggest you probably do this one last. But if you're having trouble with number three, I would start with number one, understanding what your customers want. And then for each of those things that your customers really want, find out what's preventing you from getting there. And then you'll know what is the constraint. All right, and here's that quote that I love. I think I've put this in almost every presentation that I've ever gave because I like it so much, but it's from this guy who some of you might know. And he said, customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied, even when they report being happy and business is great. Even when they don't yet know it, customers want something better, and your desire to delight customers will drive you to invent on their behalf. No customer ever asked Amazon to create the Prime membership program, but it sure turns out they wanted it, and I could give you many such examples. Has anyone heard this quote before? If anyone went to ProductCon, I think the first speaker actually mentioned this quote as well. I think there's a reason a lot of people mention this quote. And the first speaker was from Netflix. So this is not just an Amazon concept. This is a concept that applies across many companies, many different businesses. But again, spend 80% of your time with your product vision on knowing what your customers want. Another really common question that comes up is, how big does my vision need to be? Let's think of number one, a crack in the sidewalk vision. I could make a product vision that just really not remarkable. And the way I've represented this here is I have my blue bar, which is the things that I already know, and then I have my little red question marks, which is the uncertainty that I need to get there. And you can think of a crack in the sidewalk problem as a problem space where I've figured almost all of it out, and I just need a tiny bit left to get there. So a real example of a crack in the sidewalk product vision is, hey, I have this button for users to sign up for my product. I'm going to increase the size by 10 pixels. That's a crack in the sidewalk product vision. And there's definitely a place for crack in the sidewalk product visions, but I would say most of the time you're not going to be doing this. Second one, I picked one. I love planes. So at some point in time, someone had a vision to fly solo across the Atlantic. And it said, I'm going to take a plane, I'm going to get in, I'm going to fly all the way by myself across the Atlantic. And this is not a crack in the sidewalk product vision anymore. There's a few more red question marks. And you can see where we're going here. We're laying out a spectrum of how much do I need to cross to get to where I need to be in my vision. So next one, put a woman on the moon. How many people know? Has there been a woman on the moon? No, exactly. No woman has ever touched the moon. I think we're going to change that soon, but this is one we have not actually solved yet. And there's a few more question marks in order for us to get there. And you can just imagine conceptually, crack in the sidewalk, Atlantic Ocean, moon, and then the last one, a weekend trip to Mars. A lot of question marks there. And you can sort of line these up and evaluate your own product vision and say, how much of a risk am I taking? Do I only have 2 question marks, or do I have, I think that's 19 question marks right there. And evaluate, kind of where you're landing here. I would suggest for most people in this room, you want to go somewhere in between this one. Generally, the most successful product visions between 20 and 50% uncertainty and 50 and 80% certainty. And you'll find as you get more senior, as you understand more about your product space, you can start getting to these ones. You also might find that when you start in your first job, if you come in on your first day and you talk about going to Mars, people might not believe you. So you can move your way down the difficulty or uncertainty in your product visions as you learn more information, as you earn trust, as you build a track record. And this last quote here, I can't remember who said this, but it says, when 99% of people doubt you, you're either gravely wrong or about to make history. And yeah, I don't know if everyone has felt that before, but a lot of time you really don't know. And the way I found to know if you're either gravely wrong or about to make history is the people who are about to make history typically have answers to these question marks, and the people who are gravely wrong don't have answers to those question marks and are hoping it'll just happen. So this is a hard question to answer, but generally that's how you know. You can also evaluate other people's product visions this way. Do they know something that I don't know that they can solve these question marks, or are they just hoping it'll happen and talking about a very grand result? All right, let's check our product vision. Does anyone have a product vision that they're doing right now, actually? This is the question you should answer more than any other question. Why will customers love this? And at many companies, this is going to be the first question that appears in any vision document, and any presentation you have. You really need to be able to answer this question. And I think for your example, the answer is customers will love this because it's classic recommendation scenario. Will lead them to other strains that they will really love. Yeah, curation is a very hard problem. Netflix has this, Amazon has this, physical stores have this. Customers have a very difficult time choosing from many options, and they love it when we just queue up great recommendations for them. Second one is there a market opportunity? There are some things that customers really love that just don't have a market opportunity. One of them that's very interesting, I ride an electric skateboard here, and I really love this. This customer is loving it. But when I think about my electric skateboard very critically, the market opportunity is actually a little bit smaller because it's kind of hard to ride a skateboard. And it's also quite dangerous. And just a lot of customers aren't willing to invest that. You may have one set of customer who really, really loves this product, but your market opportunity is actually fairly small. So I would really start with, will your customers love this? But as you're answering that question, also think, is there a market opportunity for this? A really classic example is customers would love if you just gave them free money, but there's zero market opportunity there. So I would not suggest that. Third one is, again, about that crack in the sidewalk to weekend on Mars example. How much uncertainty do I have to solve? I suggested 20 to 40% is the sweet spot, but think really critically about how much of a risk am I taking here? We constantly evaluate risk in other decisions we make. How are we investing? Should I buy this house? Do I want to date this person? And we're calculating that risk tolerance in the back of our head, either consciously or subconsciously. If you're creating a product vision, I would encourage you to really think critically and concretely about what type of risks I'm taking. And often when you present a product vision document, you'll be asked to quantify this, or at least detail it in very clear steps so your leaders or your investors or the other people you need to convince know what they're up against. The next one is those product constraints. I talked about spending a weekend on Mars. I honestly can't solve those product constraints right now, so I would not suggest that as a product vision. If you're proposing something, your vision, you're doing so to cross that uncertainty, and if you have no plan whatsoever to cross that uncertainty, not even idea, this might rule out your product vision. So let's take that recommendations example. Do you think you have a way to, your recommendation algorithm, how do you think you're going to cross that uncertainty and get customers those recommendations that they'll really love? So you have some type of recommendation algorithm. But if I had the same vision and I told you I was just going to pick them out of a hat, you might not believe me. So you need to have some idea about how you're going to solve those product constraints. The next one is, has someone tried this before? This is a tricky one because there's two answers to that, and they both have the same answer. So if someone has already tried this, you want to know, what do I know or have that they don't? That will make my vision a little bit different than the one that's already been tried. And if someone hasn't tried this before, you want to know, why has nobody tried this before? Because that might tell you something that people have already learned. And the last one, if you have a vision, you will frequently need to know how you're meeting that vision. And then it can include metrics. It can also include milestones. But you can't just throw out a vision into thin air and then never follow up on it. If you want to bring your stakeholders, your investors, the people you work for along for the journey, you need to give them some way of knowing, am I on the right track? So we're going to know that our recommendations algorithm is successful when customers who are recommended other products rate them very highly. There you go. There's how you measure your vision. So I have not used Rent the Runway, but if they offered a product that was for me, I kind of like it. I might use their product. So let's evaluate their product vision. And by the way, Rent the Runway is now a unicorn, and it's notable because it's a female-founded unicorn. So Jenny and Jen, their company is now worth over $1 billion.
That is insane.
Yeah, it is insane. But let's think about it. How did they get there?
Good for them.
So if you know nothing about dresses or what women wear to events, I really didn't know a lot about that either. You have to learn a little bit about, what are the dynamics of your product space? What are the constraints? What do your customers really love? And these two really nailed that. So what they found is that customers really want to wear, a designer label, and they want to feel special at that event. They want it to show up in the pictures. They really want that magical going out event, red carpet experience. But the problem was, those dresses or the outfit they wanted to wear, the cost was absurd. And you don't want to spend $6,000 on a dress that you wear once. And another thing they knew is that customers didn't want to wear the same dress twice. In the example that they gave, I can't remember if it was Jen or Jenny, but she watched her sister agonize over choosing a dress to attend a wedding. And she had to attend 2 weddings back to back. And she knew the photos would show up on Facebook, and she didn't want to be caught wearing the same dress in both sets of photos. But she also, let's say the dress costs $2,000. She also didn't want to spend $4,000 on dresses. So, she just agonized over, what do I do? Am I willing to take the social cost of being caught wearing the same dress twice? And to me, that's not very intuitive. I didn't understand that market, but these two found that customers were having a really tough time solving that. And what they realized is there's an opportunity for customers to rent the same designer piece, wear it once, and then have someone else do the same thing. And customers really didn't mind doing that. They were really happy to wear it once and then have it dry cleaned professionally and then pass it along to someone else. They even found that people are doing this among their friends. They're saying, hey, I really need a dress for this event next weekend. Can I borrow one of yours? We're like the same size. And people are doing that among their own friend networks. So can anyone see where this vision is kind of coming together here? This one was very unintuitive to me. But if you want to read more about them, they're an HBS, Harvard Business School case study, and there's a lot out there about these guys. So they solve designer dress and accessory rentals. And hey, maybe they'll introduce something for me. I don't know if any of the guys here, hey, I just had someone who said, you need to have white tie attire for this wedding. And I was like, 1, what is that? And 2, where am I going to get that? 3, why do I want to get that if I'm only going to wear it for your wedding and never wear it again? I think it has to do something with like long coattail or something like that. You would never see me in that. But I need to go to this guy's wedding. So yeah, they have a great product vision. Communicating your product vision. This is one that I think a lot of people didn't expect me to talk about, and I almost didn't talk about this. But the more I thought about it, it's a really, really important part of any product vision. Again, like I said, if it's just stuck in your head and you cannot communicate this to anyone else, you're not going to go anywhere. And maybe there's a very, very small subset of problem domains where you can do this. One that came to mind was, Mozart creating like a masterpiece symphony. Maybe he could do it on his own. He just sat in his room and composed music and, came up with, one of his many grand pieces. But most people will not be able to achieve success without communicating their vision to other people. You need them to help you build your vision, You need to bring them along for the journey, so they give you support in other domains where you're not an expert. And you also need to convince investors or executives who will give you funding in your large company to go execute on what you want to do. Does anyone know this guy? Paul Graham. What does Paul Graham do? Yeah. Does anyone know what Y Combinator is? Yeah. Y Combinator is a very well-known Silicon Valley startup accelerator. And this is a quote that Paul Graham, the guy one of the co-founders of this, said about Airbnb. You can actually listen to this on a podcast. It's called How I Built This. But one of the founders, Joe Gebbia, goes into detail about how he went to this meeting with Paul Graham, told him his vision about Airbnb, which I suspect many of us have used before. And Paul said, "You mean people actually use this? Well, that's weird." And then just fell flat. And what this says to me, now knowing Airbnb is a wildly successful company, is communicating your vision is very difficult. Has anyone gone into like a meeting or a presentation where they, spent weeks, months on this grand idea, and then they presented it, and people just looked at them like? Has anyone been through that before? I've been through that, honestly, so I know what it's like. But at some point in your career, you may get that. And these very successful people at Airbnb did get that, and so did many other people. And all that really means is, you may or may not be on track, but really communicating your vision is very hard. So don't assume that just because you have the best ideas means it's all going to work out. And this, I hope, is one reminder of that. You can say whatever you want about Airbnb, but by many metrics, they're very successful, and they overcame a reaction like this from a very prominent person who you could say is a do or die spot for many startups. All right. Does anyone recognize that logo? That is Amazon S3, Simple Storage Service. And we talked about communicating your product vision. And I work in Amazon, a well-known and I think highly effective way to communicate your product vision is by working backwards. And what this means is you start at the end from what is the customer result you want to achieve and work backwards to tell you what exactly you need to do to get there. And if you're a product manager at Amazon, what you literally do is you write a 6-page document where the first page is the press release that you're going to send when you're done with the entire project. What I have here, this is from 2006. This is the beginning of the actual press release for Amazon S3. And I'll just give you a little bit to check out the bottom paragraph there. But you'll notice a couple things about this. It's in really plain language. I think the word a lot of people use is no geek speak. You need to be really articulate, really concise, and frame it to a customer about why they want to use this thing. So what they say here is they say, we make web scale computing easier for developers. It gives any developer access to the same highly scalable, reliable, fast, and inexpensive data storage that Amazon uses. And the first line is really the only one you need. It's storage for the internet. So I'm not sure, I wasn't around at this time, but I'm sure someone at Amazon spent a lot of time thinking about what exactly is my customer really going to love about this, and how do I communicate that in what was that, like 4 sentences to really nail home why they're going to love this. So if you're a product manager at Amazon, this is one way you do it. Even if you're not a product manager at Amazon, this is one tool that you can use to communicate your vision. And it's called the PRFAQ, which stands for Press Release and Frequently Asked Questions. And at the beginning, you have your press release. In the end, you spend time answering frequently asked questions about how you're going to get there. What's the data that shows you what customers really want, things like that. They want to watch The Crown recently. Yeah? Remember this scene? So I wanted to show that's Queen Elizabeth II. And the reason I wanted to show her is because there's this thing called the Christmas message where royalty would, speak to their community. And Queen Elizabeth took a very different take and decided to use television in 1957 to communicate her message. And what I really want to get across there is use the right tool for the job. And what I mean by that, in Queen Elizabeth's case, that was TV, because she could reach a lot of people, because people could see her and see her empathy. And it was really effective. But the tool that you might use to communicate your product vision It could be any one of things. I just told you about the PR FAQ at Amazon, but you might do a PowerPoint. Amazon doesn't do that, but I have communicated my vision that way in other places. You might give a speech. You might need to hold a meeting with the 10 different stakeholders that you need to convince. Sometimes you need to prepare a pitch deck for your investors. There's many different ways you need to communicate this, and you need to know which one is going to be effective. There's a last term here. It's called nemowashi. Does anyone know what that one means? So it's a Japanese concept, and Japan is a relatively low conflict culture. And what you do is you meet privately with everyone else before and tell them about the idea and bring them on board, address their concerns. And then when you finally get to the big meeting, the one that really matters, everyone is on the same page. So it's one technique of getting everyone on the same page about your vision that could be effective depending on the circumstances of who you're working with and what you need to get across. Another one is, like I talked about in that PR FAQ, is you have to show empathy. I worked on HoloLens, and one way I've reflected about HoloLens is we framed the vision in a way that was all about how cool the technology was and all these wild things you could do with holograms. But one area I think we're not as effective is we didn't really frame the vision in terms of the customer problem that we're solving. And if I had gone back, I would have done it a little bit differently and really focus on why will customers love this. When a customer sees this marketing material or vision document or press release, why are they going to care about what I have to say to them? And if you think about it in terms of how you see versus what the customer sees, your vision might fall flat. Another one is, and this is kind of related to that nemowashi concept, is you want to bring your stakeholders along for the journey. I'm going to give one example after this of a time this didn't happen, but sometimes you're going to get some critical feedback. You're going to present your vision to someone and they're going to say, hey, you know what, that kind of sucks. I don't believe you. Or I don't see a future for that. Or I don't believe your data. Or hey, I have this other idea that I think is better than yours. Why don't we do that one instead? And you could ignore those people. You could shout at them loudly. You could just not meet with them at all. But I would suggest do as much as you can to bring them along for your journey and turn them into allies of your journey. If you keep pushing people away from your journey rather than snowballing and making your journey stronger, you're going to have a tough time. And this is a very hard skill to learn. There's a temptation to say these people are wrong, I don't need them. But if you have people on your side, they can help you evangelize your vision as well. The last one is use data. I didn't really talk about data so far, but when you are presenting a new idea or something about customers or a market opportunity, if you use data to justify what you're saying, people are more likely to believe you. So I could give an entire different talk on this, but if you use data, your vision can often be much more effective. I also talked about anecdotes there because anecdotes can frame data. So you can have a statistic and then maybe give a customer quote to say what that statistic is really about. You can say, hey, let's use your recommendations example again. You can say 74% of customers made a third purchase after buying one recommended item. And then you can give a quote from a customer saying, hey, I was paralyzed about making this decision. I didn't know what to get. Thank you for recommending this to me. Now I have 4 different options that I really love. It just really helps frame what that data told you. All right. So I want to use this product. So? Okay, I think if I would have asked like 5 years ago, there would have been a lot more yeses. And there was one for me as well. But I want to talk about Facebook Newsfeed. Did anyone use Newsfeed in 2006? I did. Awesome. So I have in the top left here, that's what Facebook looked like in 2006. There were only profiles, and you could only see people in the same school as you. It was a very different website. It was kind of like a directory. Like that's where the name The Facebook came from. And just completely out of nowhere, they introduced this newsfeed thing. And it said, Will just made friends with this person. Will liked this person's picture. And like people really didn't like it. There are all these news articles about how people are leaving Facebook. They thought it was creepy. it really didn't land very well. And Facebook, has somewhat of a history of launching new visionary things, and then their users don't really like them. But Newsfeed was probably the first one. And the funny thing about Newsfeed, and the reason why I chose it as an example, is now we think of Newsfeed as Facebook. Like, some people think like Newsfeed is one feature on Facebook, but many people attribute that to the entire experience. It's the homepage. It seems obvious now. But I just wanted to highlight how when you introduce your vision, and here is the vision, your personalized interactive newspaper that is published directly by the set of people you care about, may not seem obvious right away. And if you don't communicate it, if you don't bring your users along for the journey, they might not like what you have to offer them. And maybe Facebook had enough momentum to get past this. Users loved other parts of the experience. They were a successful company in other ways that they were able to overcome this. But if you just bomb a new feature on your users, you don't bring them along for your journey. You come to a meeting with a critical stakeholder and you just land some new bomb on them. It might not go as well. So Facebook, super successful, but here's an example of a super successful company where the communication is maybe not what they would have liked. You can also watch a talk from this guy, Chris Cox. He was the chief product officer. Just type in FMC 2012 Chris Cox, and you can listen to him talk about this. It's a very interesting talk. The last one, from product vision to product reality. So I'm only going to spend a tiny bit of time on this one, but the vision isn't everything. You need to be able to execute on the vision. And I'm going to give you a few tips on how you might do that. If you've got everything so far, you're, I would say, 80% of the way there. The 20% is just got to be really crisp in the execution. And here are some ways you might do that. By the way, I think 3 days from now is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And we still don't have a woman on the moon. So this one has not been solved yet. Well, let's break it down. One strategy that I'd really suggest when you propose your vision or you need to execute your vision is to quantize it. Is anyone a physics nerd here? Quantize. So, for example, light, we think of it as continuous, but it's actually discrete units, otherwise a photon. So what you might think here is, we have our vision, which spans this continuous stream of question marks that we need to solve. But hey, let's break it down to 3 parts. First we're going to focus on this one darker purple arrow. That's our minimum viable product, our first release, first step of our vision. And then, hey, we'll learn, and as we keep going, we'll solve the other 2 parts. This is a really effective technique because if you try to go from 0 to 100 all in one, you might lose people on the way. They might lose faith in you. You might not be able to answer all those problems at once. So typically, you will break down your vision into smaller units that you can achieve, one-on-one as you go along. And I chose, you could just say, milestones is one you hear a lot, or sprints. I chose quantize because it's a little bit weird word and it helps me remember it. But really all you need to know is just break it down into discrete parts that you can achieve one by one and reach the journey. Another way you think about this is, say you're going on a road trip across Europe all the way to Asia. You're probably not going to do it in one drive. You're going to break it down to smaller parts. Otherwise, you'll reach exhaustion, you'll get hungry, your car will break down. It's not going to go super well. A second one is you want to set goals to measure success. This could also be a completely separate talk on its own. But you want to know, how do I know I'm getting there? You could, put this great vision out there, and then people are going to come back to you and say, are we doing it, Will? How far along are we? That might be your investors who come to you and say, should I give you more money? Or your executive who says the same thing, should we keep funding this product? Or do we want to double down on this? You need to set some goals to help you measure your success and tell you if you are doing well in your vision or not. So I guess let's take that recommendation example again. Like, what is a goal you might set to know if your recommendation algorithm vision is successful or not? This is actually quite hard because not only do you have to describe what your vision is, you have to describe, in metrics or more specific results, what it looks like when you get there. And you might not have that fully conceptualized yet. So you might want to do this after your vision, but before you get started. The last one is pretty general to like any development process. We want to prototype, experiment, validate, learn, and incorporate new information. There are very few product visions that start and finish exactly the same. We can go back to that newsfeed example. Newsfeed today is not the original newsfeed that Chris Cox proposed in 2006. He's learned new information. New problems have come up for Facebook. We have things like fake news. We have new features like marketplace. We have ads on the newsfeed now. We have to change our vision as we go along and learn new information. And one comment I have about this is people who are visionaries, who have a grand vision, they think that changing their vision means that they were wrong initially, and they're reluctant to do that. But really, that is not true at all. All it means is that you are taking new information that challenges your assumptions and improves your vision. You get 0 credit for being wrong at the beginning. You get all the credit for being wrong at the end. Or for being right at the end, sorry. So you are highly invested in constantly listening and changing your vision as you go along. You might not want to scrap your entire vision. If you're doing that you might want to go back to the drawing board, but it's okay to change a few elements as you go along. All right, last example. Does anyone buy one of these? I wanted to buy one, but they're very expensive. I don't love that about this company. Yeah. Does anyone use any other product besides the vacuum cleaner from them? Yeah, what product do you use? The fan? Oh, the cool fan and the air goes in the middle without a fan blade. Very cool. Yeah, so this is James Dyson. He's a Sir, actually. He's Sir James Dyson. But he invented the cyclonic vacuum cleaner. And he has a very interesting story. Again, like that same podcast, How I Built This, you can listen to him in his own words describe how this happened. But let's evaluate his vision. And the reason I chose this vision is because James's vision is a little bit more about getting there. It's less about ideating. It's less about knowing what your customer wants. This guy went through over 5,000 prototypes to get the cyclonic vacuum cleaner right. So he knew what his customers wanted. He knew that existing vacuums, they lost suction. They're bagged vacuums made by companies like Hoover. One of his investors said, you're crazy to do this because if there was any better way, Hoover already would have figured it out. So yeah, like the name for a vacuum cleaner is literally Hoover in some places just because they were so ubiquitous. But he knew customers were pretty frustrated with that technology. They were tired of buying new bags. They're frustrated how, after vacuuming 10 times, now I gotta go to the store and buy a new bag just to have it work again. And he was also really disappointed by the power. And he had some exposure to sawmills, and he saw a cyclonic separator in a sawmill, which takes dust out of the air, so you don't breathe it in or it doesn't damage machinery. And he said, hey, I think actually his wife was the one who really hated the bagged vacuums. And he said, I can do better than that. I know I can use this cyclonic separator technology and come up with something better than all these other companies did. I think it took him 5 years, and he says he made 5,000 prototypes. And even when he had the right product, it didn't quite work out. He got actually a Japanese company to take a chance on him, and that was his first success. But here's another example of what we'd all say is an awesome vision now. Like, it's very hard to find a bagged vacuum cleaner anymore. But hey, over 5,000 times to get it right. So if you have your vision and customers want this, and you have a very solid market opportunity, but you're having trouble getting there, think of James Dyson and know that not all is lost. You can eventually get there. If you want to learn more, I would highly recommend the podcast for him also.